Have you ever felt the unbearable weight of words, so many spoken around you? Rushing, clashing, colliding, filling every space until silence itself seems like a crime? You sit in a room where voices rise and fall like waves, each trying to dominate, to prove, to persuade. And yet, you notice something. The ones who shout the loudest often convince the least. Their noise betrays their insecurity. And then there is you caught in the current of this storm, wondering whether real strength lies not in adding to the noise, but in resisting it altogether. Imagine standing in the middle of an argument where tempers flare, accusations fly, and you remain silent. Your silence is not weakness. It burns with an intensity stronger than words could ever carry. But here lies the paradox. Society has taught you that to remain silent is to be powerless, to be ignored, to be invisible. And so, you feel torn between two contradictory forces: the urge to speak, to prove yourself, and the instinct to hold back, to preserve your dignity in the quiet. What if silence itself is the weapon you've been overlooking? What if strength is not in the overflow of language, but in the mastery of restraint? Marcus Aurelius once asked himself, "You always own the option of having no opinion. Could it be that by choosing not to enter the fray, you demonstrate a power that no argument can defeat? You have been told your whole life that you must speak up to be seen. From the classrooms where participation was graded, to the workplaces where loudness was mistaken for leadership, silence has been treated like absence, like failure. But deep down, you suspect the opposite, that words often expose weakness, that silence reveals a kind of sovereignty beyond reach. Think of Friedrich Nietzsche's piercing observation. Silence is worse. All truths that are kept silent become poisonous. At first, it sounds like a warning, but look again. Doesn't it also imply that silence is powerful enough to contain truth itself? That your unspoken thoughts carry a weight heavier than any declaration? You ask yourself, why do I feel both drawn to silence and afraid of it? Why does silence make others uncomfortable, as though they are standing in front of a mirror they cannot control? And why do you sometimes break your silence too soon out of fear that others will mistake it for ignorance? You know this tension well. You have tasted the moment when you chose not to answer, and the room shifted. Eyes turned toward you, not because you raised your voice, but because you withheld it. That silence became a presence in invisible field that others could not escape. It unsettled them. It unsettled you. But here's the great question, the one that hovers over you like a sword. Is silence a shield that protects or a weapon that wounds? Does it empower you, or does it hollow you out? Are you hiding behind silence, or are you wielding it like a blade too sharp for others to touch? The paradox burns inside you. You sense that silence is not passive. It is charged, alive, dangerous. And yet, you do not fully understand why. Why does it command respect in some moments and invite contempt in others? Why does it give you peace at times, and at others, chain you in loneliness? You stand on the threshold of this mystery. To cross it, you must go deeper into the roots of your own psychology, into the hidden architecture of power, fear, and identity. Because silence is not just the absence of speech, it is the battlefield of your inner life. And so, you step forward into the hidden problem. You begin to realize that silence, though it feels like a natural force, has been quietly shaped and distorted by centuries of conditioning. From the moment you learned to speak, the world trained you to equate words with worth. Praise was given when you answered quickly, when you filled the void, when you proved your knowledge aloud. And so, silence became a shadow, something to be feared, something that hinted at inadequacy. But ask yourself, why is silence so threatening in a world of constant chatter? Why do people rush to fill it, as if stillness itself were unbearable? The answer lies deep in psychology. Human beings are wired to fear the unknown, and silence is the unknown made audible. When you withhold speech, you leave others suspended in uncertainty. They cannot predict your judgment, your stance, or your hidden thoughts. This ambiguity gnaws at them because people crave control. And so, they project their anxieties into your quiet. Think of it this way. In your silence, others see a mirror reflecting their own insecurities. That is why they demand, say something. Don't just sit there. They need your words not for truth, but for reassurance that they are not alone in the void. Sigmund Freud once suggested that much of human behavior is driven by hidden fears, by the unconscious need to cover over vulnerability. Silence unmasks this fear. It forces the psyche to confront the absence of noise, the absence of distraction, the raw edge of existence itself. That is why it feels unbearable. Marcus Aurelius understood this. In his meditations, he often reminded himself to resist being pulled into the frantic noise of others. He wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." And yet, you sense the irony in this calmness is the very thing society teaches you to avoid. Because a calm and silent mind is ungovernable. It cannot be manipulated with slogans, demands, or applause. Nietzsche, too, whispered this secret through his radical philosophy. He warned that most people cannot endure the silence of their own minds. They seek distraction, entertainment, arguments, noise, anything to escape the confrontation with themselves. He declared, "He who cannot command himself must obey." And in silence, you are faced with the question, do you command yourself, or do you let the noise command you? But the problem goes deeper still. Silence threatens the very fabric of social systems. Consider how power operates. Leaders, corporations, and institutions thrive on keeping you talking, reacting, consuming words. The more you speak, the more predictable you become. The more predictable you are, the easier you are to control. Silence, however, interrupts this cycle. It creates an unpredictable gap. It withdraws energy from the system that feeds on your constant participation. This is why silence feels like rebellion, even when you do not intend it. It unsettles teachers who expect answers, bosses who expect constant updates, friends who expect immediate replies. Your silence is interpreted not as neutrality, but as defiance. Why? Because the world has conditioned everyone to believe that absence of speech equals absence of self. But you know this isn't true. You've tasted the moments when your silence carried more force than 1,000 words. Yet you still wrestle with doubt. Why? Because inside you lives a tension, the fear of being misunderstood. Silence protects you, but it also isolates you. It gives you dignity, but it also makes you invisible. This is the hidden problem. Silence is both a sanctuary and a prison. And so you ask yourself, is my silence chosen, or is it imposed? Am I silent because I am strong or because I am afraid? These questions dig into your soul, unsettling your certainty. Think of how often you've spoken not because you had something to say, but because you feared silence would make you appear weak. How often have you filled the air with words, only to regret them later, realizing they exposed more of your insecurity than your strength? In these moments, you see the truth. Silence is not the problem. Your relationship to silence is. You were taught to see it as absence. But perhaps silence is not absence at all. Perhaps it is presence pure, concentrated presence. The problem is that you do not yet know how to wield it. You feel its potential, but you fear its cost. And here lies the heart of the dilemma. Silence is power, but it is also dangerous. If you master it, you command yourself. If you avoid it, you remain enslaved to noise. But if you misuse it, if your silence becomes withdrawal, avoidance, or cowardice, it corrodes you from within. This is the hidden problem. Silence is not neutral. It is always charged with fear, with strength, with possibility. And unless you face this truth, your silence will own you instead of you owning it. The tension grows heavier. You sense that the roots go even deeper, that silence does not only shape your psychology, but your entire reality. You must now turn toward what lies beneath, the unseen consequences. You may think silence is a personal matter, a choice of temperament, a quirk of personality. But silence reaches further than you imagine. It does not only dwell in your mind, it infiltrates your relationships, your society, your very sense of who you are. Silence shapes the architecture of reality, even when you are unaware of it. Consider the silence that follows after a mistake in public. You trip, you falter, and suddenly the voices around you stop. That silence is not empty. It's filled with judgment, with expectation, with the unspoken narrative of failure. You feel it press on your skin. The truth is that silence always carries meaning, whether you intend it or not. Think of the way cognitive biases color your interpretation of silence. When someone does not reply to your message, your mind begins to invent stories. They're angry. They've lost interest. They're judging me. You project your own fears into their silence. And when you remain silent, others do the same to you. Silence becomes a canvas onto which the human mind splashes its anxieties and fantasies. But here is the hidden danger. Silence does not just reflect, it constructs. In relationships, unspoken words accumulate like dust in the corners of a room. Resentments grow not because of what was said, but because of what was left unsaid. A silence between lovers can build a wall taller than any argument. A silence in society about injustice, about suffering, about truth can become complicity. Nietzsche once remarked, "All things are subject to interpretation. Whichever interpretation prevails at a given time is a function of power, not truth." Silence is fertile ground for interpretation. Whoever controls the narrative about silence controls the meaning of your life. If you do not define your silence, others will define it for you. And here lies the unseen consequence. Silence can liberate you, or it can enslave you. When you choose silence deliberately, it radiates strength. But when silence is imposed, when fear locks your tongue, it corrodes your soul. Slowly, almost invisibly, you begin to disappear. Neuroscience reveals that silence is not neutral for the brain. Extended silence triggers heightened self-awareness, activating the same neural pathways that process threat. That's why you feel restless in a quiet room. You confront yourself without distraction. If you avoid this confrontation, you become addicted to noise, to stimulation, to constant conversation. You lose the capacity to be alone with your own thoughts. But imagine the societal scale of this truth. Cultures saturated with noise advertisements, news, endless chatter breed individuals who fear inner reflection. A society that fears silence is a society that fears depth. It stays on the surface, intoxicated by slogans, easily manipulated by whoever shouts the loudest. And in such a society, the individual who can endure silence becomes dangerous. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to endure what others could not. He knew that silence is a form of discipline, a training ground for the soul. In silence, you confront mortality, vanity, desire. You strip away illusions. Yet, in the world you inhabit, silence is constantly interrupted. The machine of culture thrives on noise, because noise keeps you distracted. So ask yourself, what happens to you when you never claim silence? You become restless, easily provoked, enslaved to the latest outrage. You lose the ability to listen, not just to others, but to yourself. And what is a person who cannot hear their own inner voice, if not a shadow drifting among the voices of others? But silence also hides another, more subtle consequence. It reshapes identity. The way you handle silence becomes the way others define you. If you speak quickly, you may be judged rash. If you remain quiet, you may be judged wise or cold or distant. Silence gives others permission to invent your character. Slowly, you become less yourself and more a projection of their imagination. And yet, within this projection, there is power because you are no longer bound by the noise of your own explanations. Here the stakes become clear. Silence is never passive. It builds, it destroys, it defines. It can protect your dignity, but it can also suffocate your truth. If you leave it unexplored, it will shape you in ways you do not choose. If you confront it, it becomes your ally, your weapon, your shield. And so, you stand again at a precipice. You feel the weight of silence, not only in your personal struggles, but in the structure of the world itself. Every unspoken word is a thread in the web of society. Every pause reshapes the dynamics of power. Silence has been quietly governing you, governing others, governing entire cultures. The urgency grows. You sense that you cannot escape this force by ignoring it. If you do, silence will consume you, either by isolating you from yourself or by making you complicit in the noise of the world. The only path forward is to rebel. But rebellion does not mean breaking silence with noise. No. True rebellion means redefining silence itself, claiming it as your own, bending it into a force of strength rather than submission. The time has come to learn how to break free. You feel it now, the weight of silence pressing on you, demanding to be understood, demanding to be claimed. You know the hidden problem. You have seen the unseen consequences. The time has come to turn, to rebel not against silence itself, but against the lies that have bound it. Rebellion begins with recognition. You are not weak when you are silent. You are only weak when you let silence be defined for you by others. That is the first chain to break. Ask yourself, what if you no longer feared the judgments that others project onto your quiet? What if you no longer needed to explain your silence, no longer felt guilty for it? Imagine reclaiming it as your fortress. The very thing that once made you feel invisible becomes your throne. History offers you examples of such rebellion. Think of Socrates, who often paused, forcing his students into discomfort until they revealed their own contradictions. Think of Marcus Aurelius, who wrote his philosophy not to be performed for applause, but to be whispered in silence to his own soul. Think even of Nietzsche, who withdrew from noisy society to write in solitude the thoughts that would explode like thunder years later. Their silence was not weakness, it was preparation. But how do you apply this rebellion to your own life? You begin by resisting the reflex to fill every pause. The next time you are asked a question, wait, hold the silence. Let others feel the discomfort before you answer. Notice how the balance of power shifts, not because you spoke louder, but because you refused to rush. You created space, and in that space, authority was born. Then, turn inward. Claim silence not only in conversation, but in your own mind. This is the deeper rebellion. To carve out moments each day where you step away from noise, from chatter, from endless stimulation. At first, the silence will feel unbearable, like a mirror that exposes too much. But if you endure it, you will discover something extraordinary. Your mind begins to settle, and beneath the storm of thought, there is a stillness that no outside force can touch. This is the silence Marcus Aurelius sought, the calm mind that cannot be shaken. It is here that you begin to command yourself. Nietzsche would call this the path to becoming who you are, the refusal to be swallowed by the herd. By sitting in silence, you rebel against the culture that demands your constant reaction. You create yourself anew. But rebellion also means using silence as strategy. Imagine you are in conflict at work, at home, in friendship. Others rush to defend themselves, to accuse, to justify. You remain silent. You watch. You see how words betray insecurity. And when you finally choose to speak, your words cut deeper, because they are few, because they are earned. This is not avoidance. This is mastery. Yet be warned, rebellion is not about hiding forever in silence. That would be cowardice disguised as strength. No rebellion is about choosing when to be silent and when to speak, no longer out of fear, but out of freedom. It is about owning both the noise and the quiet. Imagine this. You walk into a room where others expect you to chatter, to explain, to conform. You do not. You sit calmly, observing, commanding the space without wasting breath. People begin to sense it. You are not carried by their noise. You carry yourself. This is the presence of the strong. And once you taste it, you begin to see how much noise you used to tolerate. Empty conversations, shallow arguments, the endless scroll of distractions. You see that most of it was never necessary. Your rebellion cuts through it. You choose silence not as absence, but as essence. You choose words not as reflex, but as weapons sharpened by restraint. And with this choice comes sovereignty. You are no longer enslaved to the need to be heard. You do not beg for attention because your silence already commands it. You do not seek validation because your stillness gives you strength. This is the freedom Nietzsche spoke of, the self-command Marcus Aurelius practiced, to live not by reaction, but by creation. And yet you sense that even this is not the final truth. Rebellion is powerful, but it is only the threshold. Beyond rebellion lies something greater. The ultimate realization that silence is not only a tool, not only a strategy, but a revelation. You feel yourself standing at the edge of it now, on the border of the deepest insight. What is this silence you've been wielding? What final truth does it reveal? To find out, you must step into the last, most powerful realization, the ultimate truth. You have rebelled. You have claimed silence as your weapon. But now you must face the deepest question. What is silence truly? Not as a tactic, not as a tool, but as the essence of strength itself. Imagine standing on a mountain peak at dawn. The world is still. The wind whispers faintly. The earth breathes beneath you, and you realize silence is not the absence of sound. Silence is presence in its purest form. It is reality stripped bare. And in this presence, you discover the ultimate truth. Silence is not what you hold. Silence is what holds you. Think of Marcus Aurelius, who wrote in his private journal, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He did not mean silence as escape from life, but as the innermost sanctuary where life itself is revealed. In silence, you see the movements of your mind, the stirrings of your fear, the birth of your desires. You see yourself without disguise. And Nietzsche, ever radical, once wrote, asterisk, "The greatest events, they are not our loudest, but our stillest hours." You feel the weight of those words now. Greatness does not roar. It emerges in stillness, in the moments when the world pauses and you stand face to face with your own becoming. Silence is not emptiness, it is creation. This is the final realization. Silence is the ground of power, because it is the ground of being. Words, arguments, opinions, all of them rise and fall like waves. But silence is the ocean beneath. When you root yourself in silence, you root yourself in what cannot be shaken. That is why the strong are quiet, not because they lack words, but because they dwell in a depth where words are too shallow. You begin to see your life differently now. Every time you rush to speak, you are running from yourself. Every time you filled the air with noise, you were afraid of what silence might reveal. But when you stopped, when you let silence expand, you touched something eternal, something beyond fear, beyond judgment. Here, silence is no longer a weapon against others. It is a gift to yourself. It is the reminder that you are more than the noise around you, more than the roles and expectations imposed on you. In silence, you remember that you exist. You breathe. You are. And from this stillness, your words, when you choose them, gain a new power. They no longer serve to prove, to justify, to defend. They serve to reveal. They emerge not from insecurity, but from clarity. You speak less, but when you speak, your words carry the weight of mountains. This is the paradox. Silence teaches you how to speak. Only when you can endure the void, when you can stand unshaken in stillness, do your words become more than noise. They become truth. Look back at the journey you have walked. You began in confusion, torn between the demand to speak and the pull to remain quiet. You uncovered the hidden problem, the psychological chains that made you fear silence. You saw the unseen consequences, how silence shapes relationships, societies, entire realities. You rose in rebellion, reclaiming silence as your weapon. And now, you stand at the ultimate threshold, silence not as absence, not as strategy, but as the very essence of strength, of being. What will you do with this truth? Will you return to the noise, or will you let silence carve out a new way of living? Will you dare to endure the discomfort of stillness until it transforms into clarity, into presence, into freedom? You know now that true strength is not loud. True strength does not rush to prove itself. True strength waits, watches, holds. True strength chooses silence, not because it has nothing to say, but because it has already said it, in the way it stands, in the way it lives. So when the world shouts, when others demand, when noise surrounds you like a storm, remember, you are not required to answer. You are not required to join the chaos. You have another option. You can stand in silence, rooted like a mountain, unshaken by the winds of opinion. And in that silence, you will find yourself not as the world defines you, but as you truly are. The camera lingers here. You standing in the stillness, not as someone defeated by silence, but as someone reborn through it. Your eyes no longer restless, your presence undeniable. The scene fades, but the question remains echoing in the viewer's mind, as silence itself. Will you dare to embrace the quiet, to wield it, to live by it? As silence answers,